welcome everyone to the meeting at this point. And we'll welcome to the meeting. This is a meeting of the American Civil Defense Association. We are an organization that is dedicated to helping people help themselves to get prepared for whatever trials and tribulations they may face, whether it be a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. And there are definitely some disasters looming and a lot of reason to be concerned. So we welcome and hopefully we can be helpful to you. As well as these monthly meetings, we have a website at tacda.org, and we also have publications, the Journal of Civil Defense that's been published since 1968, and we have those older issues of the Journal of Civil Defense on the website as well that are available to you, and we would highly recommend that you do that. Let me read a quick disclaimer here. Nothing in this presentation should be considered legal, medical, or financial advice. The opinions of the viewers can differ considerably and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of TACDA. You should always do your own research and consult with professionals. The format tonight is informal. We would like to allow questions on the fly so that answers will be in context. However, if you could hold the questions until the end, that would be preferable to allow some continuity of the presentation. Feel free to use the chat feature, and we'll do our best to answer questions on the chat as they come up. I'll be looking after that. My name is Jay Wimpy. I'm the current president of the American Civil Defense Association, and I am happy to present introduce our presenters, Jonathan Kylene Jones, who actually have quite a reputation of preparing a lot of emergency preparedness type information, and we've been affiliated with them for quite some time, and we're happy to have them here with us tonight talking about designer food storage. So we're all anxious to hear that. We are trying to end the meeting at roughly 7 p.m., but we'll try to play that by ear. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Jonathan and Kylene Jones, and let them start the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Jay and Roseanne. We're happy to be here with our friends, and we understand that this may be a little bit of a subject that you say, well, we're already doing this, but Kylene has done an outstanding job putting together good information that will help us understand why we need food and the kinds of food we need. And well, I'm just going to let her do most of the talking. As I always say, I'm an engineer. I was born without a personality. She's got a wonderful personality, and she teaches this all really well. So, but we'll both be talking. But this is designer food storage plans, food just the way you like it. So we're not going off of somebody else's list. We're doing what's going to work for us.
Okay, and I will just hands down tell you how important I think that is, because whenever somebody creates a list of that's what you should have for your food storage, guaranteed it's going to be wrong for you and your family, because not all of us eat the same or can eat the same. If you look at this cake that's here, I actually made that with all food storage ingredients, and it was baked in our sun oven. And so it's one of those things where if you come to my house, we're not just having rice and beans. John would love it if we just ate rice and beans, but I would not. So that's not working. Is it plugged in all the way?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start by just understanding what food storage is. We want to understand what it is, how do you store it, how long can you store it, why would you want to do this, where can I put it, and how much do I really need to have? So let's first talk about why we eat, because it's more than just calories. We eat for calories because that provides us with energy, but it doesn't stop there. We need nutrition. We need those vitamins and minerals. And one of the best things that we can do is grow a garden to go along with our basic food storage, because that significantly increases the amount of nutrition that's available to us. But we also eat for comfort. Think about this for a second, because food makes memories. Do you ever smell a food and it brings back positive feelings or negative feelings, right? Does it provide comfort, warmth? So me, everybody knows that my comfort food is chocolate, but Jonathan's is actually peanut butter sandwiches.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
There's all kinds of different reasons that we need food. Tradition, look, we're having Thanksgiving this week, right? And there's a lot of beautiful things associated with those kinds of memories. But sometimes we just eat because it tastes so good. Now let's talk about caloric requirements. And there is a wide range of caloric requirements, but generally it's 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day, which would be between 15 and 26 servings. Remember that number, because we're going to talk about that a little bit later with some of the commercial food storage plans. And we're going to kind of skip most of this, but you have your basic metabolism, right? And then you have how much you exercise. And then you have your dietary thermogenesis, which is actually the calories required to burn the food that you eat. So we always, in our food storage, err on the high side of calories, because theoretically, many of the situations which would cause us to need to use our stored foods are going to be times when we're going to need to expend more energy. If we're hunkered down in a shelter, that's not going to happen. But for the most part, if we're going to have to be out there trying to feed our families and do stuff, we're going to need that. So I want to talk for a minute about the Minnesota starvation experiment. This was super interesting. So in World War II, thousands of people died every day from starvation. And so they got together and they wanted to find out what they could do to help these people. So this was in 1945. They took 36 healthy men that volunteered as test subjects. Originally, there was a control. They put them in this control stage where they were given 3,200 calories a day. Some of them were adjusted depending on their current weight, but then they put them in a starvation phase of 1,570 calories a day. They were required to walk 22 miles a week, and their diet was carbohydrate rich and protein poor. Can you give me a drink real quick? Sorry, I should have had one to start with. So think about that. 1,570 calories is not much. And look what happened. Originally, the guy on the right, that's what he looked like. And after this experiment, look how bad he looked after that period of time. Carbohydrate rich and protein poor. So they had these foods in meager amounts: potatoes, rutabagas, turnips, whole wheat bread, and macaroni. Sorry. A lot of that sounds like the food that we're storing, right? It's very carbohydrate rich. And sometimes these guys, what they would do to fill up their stomachs, thank you, is that they would put water in with it and turn it into a soup just so that it would fill up more. But all of the food was reported to be delicious, and there was no evidence of diet fatigue. And you hear this a lot with people who are storing the food. They'll say, oh, you can't do the same thing all the time because somebody will just die even with food in front of them because they'll be so sick of it. And this study demonstrated that that was not the case. Some of my children, that may be the case with, but the findings of the study were really interesting. So there were increased rates of depression and hysteria. There was severe emotional distress. There was a preoccupation with food. These are young guys, and they totally quit going after girls, and all they could think about was food. I thought that was really interesting. They withdrew socially. There was a decline in concentration, comprehension, and judgment. They could not think rationally. Another big thing was there was a reduction in body temperature, the respiration and the heart rate, but these guys would just lay out in the sun. They were so cold, right? And then their limbs, their extremities were all swollen. So food, the lack of food can actually make your life miserable and make it so that you can't go on living. So I think that's really important to understand when it comes to calories. Now, your basic nutrition, we're always told you need to eat the rainbow because that is how you're going to get the best nutrients. There are different kinds of vitamins. There are water-soluble vitamins, which can only be stored in the body in very small amounts. So they have to continually be replenished, or you're going to have some deficiencies related to that specific nutrients. The fat-soluble vitamins actually dissolve in the fat and are stored in the fat, the liver, and other parts. And so deficiencies in these vitamins take longer to manifest themselves, but they still manifest themselves. And then there's minerals. So why do we care about vitamin deficiency? Check out all this stuff. Like, there are so many issues caused, even if you have enough calories, but you're not getting the vitamins that you need. There are a lot of very serious problems. So what should we store? I thought this was really interesting. If you store wheat, rice, pasta, dried beans, oats, and dry milk, you take care of all of those vitamins and minerals. So what are we missing? We're missing vitamin A and vitamin C. Both of those cannot be stored well, right? You could have them in a supplement, but for the most part, you need fresh food to get a good enough amount of vitamin A and vitamin C. Now, John's favorite, go ahead, tell him your favorite.
Swiss chard. She put it in big yellow letters there. And my reason for that is because it grows prolifically. I mean, we can have a little 3x3 square of Swiss chard that's enough to feed our family, more than enough. I could eat it quite often. Once or twice a week is enough for the rest of the family. But it's super healthy. It's got lots of vitamin A, vitamin C, and all the extra stuff gets cut off and thrown to the chickens. And so they eat it, which enhances their nutrition, enhances the eggs. And so, but look at these lists. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful fruits and vegetables here that provide that A and C. And as Kylene mentioned, you can get that from a supplement, but it's so much better and healthier if you can have a garden. And most of us can't do a garden year round. We're working on an indoor garden. Well, I should
That's
say
what I've been doing all the time.
Kylene
Yeah.
she is the master gardener, and she's got getting the indoor garden going. And it doesn't produce as well, but at least you can produce some. So, and then if you can do this during the spring, summer, and fall, if you can have a good garden, and then you can preserve some of that. So we always encourage people to grow a garden if there's any way that you can, whether it's a pot on the back porch or balcony or something crazy like we have 2 large gardens, whatever you can do.
So one of the things about these is that heat, they're very sensitive to heat, right? So most of your dehydrated foods aren't going to be a really good resource. Vitamin A might be a little bit different. It's still heat sensitive, but freeze-dried food is amazing. Like, it retains like 98% of the nutrients. And so if you have the ability to freeze dry some food, that, especially these fresh fruits and vegetables, that's a really, really, really good option. And as food is in storage, the nutrients actually decline. So with whole wheat, with those wheat berries, they maintain most of the nutrition for a super, super long period of time, except vitamin B. So if you're eating really old wheat, you can be vitamin B deficient. And so you want to make sure that you're somehow replacing that vitamin B in another way. And same thing with these in storage, these vitamins are going to be a little bit more fragile, even in freeze-dried foods. So what do we do about this? Well, the first thing we need to do is develop a prepper pantry. We want at least 3 months of everyday shelf-stable foods that you eat on a regular basis. This is really important, and you don't have to stop at 3 months, right? If you have the ability to keep a year supply or whatever and keep it rotated, that's really good. But at least 3 months of so that you wouldn't have to go to the market for 3 months. We did a little painful
Challenge.
experiment.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to tell them about it?
Well, we went 3 months without going to the store or going out to eat. So that left us, and we did this in late summer. So that was a real plus because we had lots coming on from the garden. Now it was still a struggle, and our kids will testify that it was not fun in some ways, but we made it fun as we could, and we ate off of our food storage and out of our garden, and we could also barter. That was one of the rules. We could barter. So, for example, my son would go over and milk our neighbor's cow, and then we would provide them vegetables,
Fruit, actually.
fruit out of our garden and orchard in exchange for the milk. And he learned how to milk a cow, and so there was some of that going on. There was some illicit activity going on. People bringing chocolate in exchange for kale. Now, who would ever do that? But I had to just kind of look the other way.
Really good friends.
Yeah. So the chocolate still came a little bit, but
so what this did for us is it helped us to find where the holes are really in our food storage, because you can do all of the theory that you want, but until you really do it, you don't know what you're going to run out of. And it was a lot harder than what we thought, because everything had to be made from scratch. By the way, this isn't my food storage, this picture here. Like, I don't do mixes and stuff. And so it took a lot longer to cook. And so when we're planning to use our food storage, we need to recognize that it takes longer and that you'll use more than what you think. And it really does. You've got holes in your food storage you may not realize.
And remember that all of this, but this 3 month supply is really buying you time. And that's what this comes down to most of the time. It's buying you time to figure out a plan B or where you're going to go next. And so remember that it does buy time. And we talked to a lot of people who have relied on that 3 month supply to get them through a pinch, or at least to get them on their way to being out of a pinch. So
yeah. Then the second category so we need our everyday food, right? We need at least that supply, but then a long-term supply that will sustain life, right? That if you really had to just live off of this for a year or 2 years or whatever, you have the basic high caloric foods that you can supplement your garden produce with, right? Because in my garden, if I just eat what's in my garden, I'm missing my calories. Yes, there are potatoes, and you can grow some things that are higher calories in your garden, but they take up a lot of space, right? And so like the rice and the beans and the wheat, even the pasta, things like that, those are all high caloric foods that will get the nutritional benefit from what you're growing in your garden. And so this basic life long-term food storage, I think, is really important too. Okay, so that's kind of the thing about food storage. Now, while we're developing our plan, we have to know some very important basic things. So first of all, how many people are you storing for? What are the ages of those people? If I'm storing for a toddler, I'm going to store food that's very different than I would for my 86-year-old mother-in-law, right? If I have a teenage boy, that changes everything, because those amounts are doubled and tripled. What are their nutritional requirements? Because, you know, a toddler has very different nutritional requirements than my mother-in-law. And then personal preferences. Are there foods that people just don't want to eat, and that's okay? Let's accommodate that in our storage plan. Now, there's dietary limitations, and I'm personally really sensitive to this because I have multiple sclerosis, which means that For me, I am very, very sensitive to foods, and there are only certain foods that I can eat. My sweet daughter-in-law cannot have any gluten at all. She has celiac disease, and she is a type 1 diabetic. And so you have to know these things about whoever you're storing, and you need to plan this to accommodate their needs, because no matter how bad things get, feeding her wheat is going to be really bad for her. So it's not like she can just turn that off. And then you need to figure out your storage goals. How long do you want your food storage to last?
All right.
Did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay, now let's talk about some very interesting food storage plans that we've come across. So this is Grandpa Ray's chunky food storage plan. And Grandpa Ray, this is food he eats all the time. He thinks chunky soup is the best thing ever. And he has a rice pot, and he cooks rice, and then he takes the chunky soup and dumps it over the top of his rice. He doesn't even heat it up, right? And that's how he eats it. And he came to me and he said, is this okay to do for a food storage plan? So let's kind of look at this plan. So 1 can of soup over cooked rice every day, you would need 150 pounds of rice, 365 cans of soup. Now 1 cup of dry rice is only 675 calories. That's a lot. And 1 can of chunky soup, 240 to 400 calories. And that means that for his daily supply, he's only got 1,000 calories. So right away we see, what is he missing? He's got to at least double this, right? In addition to that, he's missing a lot of important nutrients. He does have some great things in those chunky soups, even though they have lots of preservatives and junk in them. They've got some meat, and they've got some of the good basics. So he needs to fix this, right? But it's a decent place to start. Now we have Grandma's basement plan. And in Grandma's basement, she's seen real hunger, and so she never throws anything away, right? Someday she's going to be really glad to have that. There's not much organization, and it's not rotated regularly, which means that you just have false security down there.
Right.
Right.
You've got
You have a
peaches
nightmare.
from 1982 that while they may possibly be edible, they're not going to be nutritious or probably very satisfying.
Yeah. So if this is the state of somebody's food storage, I would be so careful. We really have to go in there and clean it out. We need to know what we have and learn how to rotate through it. Now we talked a little bit about the special diets, but I have a lot of people saying I can't do food storage because I'm gluten-free, and that's absolutely not correct. These are some of the things that you can store long-term that are gluten-free: the beans and legumes, white rice, gluten-free oats, corn, potato flakes, dry milk, and then dehydrated or freeze-dried fruits and vegetables and meats. Like, there's a lot you can have. So don't give up because you can't have wheat, because there's so many other things that you can have. By the way, that's my homemade chili. It tastes really good. Okay.
Yes, it does.
And then let's talk about a diabetic diet, right? You need low carbohydrates. And so this is a huge list of things that you can store so that you have food storage, even if you're diabetic and can't have those carbs. And a lot of, the freeze dryer thing, it's a really good thing. If you have the ability financially to swing that or to buy foods that are freeze dried, that's awesome. This is just some taco meat that we did. But okay, let's talk about prepackaged food storage programs. And let me tell you right off the bat, I'm not a fan. So if I'm not saying anything nice about it.
Yes, and I'm not a fan either. For the most part, they are quite pricey. And I think the thing that bothers me the most is it's often very deceptive, because they'll talk about, okay, here's this food and you're getting this many servings. Well, you're thinking those are meals, or at least in my mind at first, I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of several meals. And when you actually get down and you look at the labels, we're back at that situation where you're not getting near enough calories. They make this sound like it's, the save all, but it's really not giving you the calories that you need. And that's what it really comes down to as a starter. is having enough calories to be able to get through your day. And certainly we want the nutrition as well, but a lot of them just don't, they fall short when it comes to the calories. So just the key is knowing what you're getting. So if you're looking at any of these programs, make sure you know exactly what you're getting. You're seeing how many calories, and you're checking other important things, the nutrients, and are you sensitive to some of the things they're putting in there? Like Mama struggles with a sensitivity to some of the preservatives and seasonings.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, this is a basic long term for one adult. This is the basic of what you might need. Now, I kind of disagree with the 300 pounds of grain. I think you really should have 400 pounds. I think that's more realistic. 60 pounds of beans, 40 pounds of sugar. And you might think that's a lot of sugar, but if you are having to preserve any food, the sugar is really important. Fat is so important, but you can't store fats long-term very well. So you're going to need to keep those rotated. The powdered milk, like we don't ever drink milk. We don't drink milk. So we accommodate that in different ways, but
so we're looking at these as guidelines.
Yeah,
these are guidelines, but again, you need to build your program based on what works for you. Of course, making sure that we're getting the nutrients and we're getting the calories, but make sure this is your plan, not somebody else's.
And remember those guys that were suffering from the Minnesota starvation experiment? Carbohydrate rich and protein poor. So make sure that you've got adequate amounts of protein in your food storage. Now, this is an updated recommendation from Brigham Young University. And on here, one of the things that I thought was interesting is they have 73 pounds of sugar. Now, that's a lot of sugar.
Yes, per person.
But I liked how they broke this down more, and they've got like, you need 34 pounds of potato flakes and 8 pounds of dried carrots and 3 pounds of onions, but that might not be okay for your family. But this is a better place to start, I think. And notice they have the longer term items along with the short term items, because like the cooking oil, the shortening can pretty much last forever. And yeah, anyway, but the mayonnaise and the peanut butter, things like that all need to be definitely rotated through. And they did add 365 vitamin C tablets to this storage plan. Now, we are strange. I recognize that people are not like us. We're just strange. But our food storage plan is made up a lot of the things that we grow on our own property. We are always, freeze drying, canning, dehydrating, always storing, this is how we eat, and we preserve our own food. So our goal is to get to the next harvest, right? So we have to have at least a year's supply of food just to get to the next harvest. Now, there is a gift of food security. So let's talk about this for a second. If you have a child and he graduates into a twin size bed, right? You can put 12 cases of food underneath that bed. These are from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, their home storage center. You don't have to be a member. Anybody can go there. But it's a great way to get the number 10 cans at a reasonable cost. And if you put 12 cases, which would be 72 cans, that's an average sort of about 360 pounds. So you could put that child in that bed, and by the time that kid graduates from high school, all that food is edible. So you've got food security, right?
And you know what else? They can't stuff under their bed because there's already important stuff there.
If you look, there's that 3/4 of a loaf of bread and 1 cup of beans. If you have 360 pounds, that's about how much you are eating every day. That's about what you can do. I mean, don't get me wrong, because if there's potatoes there and oats there, it's other stuff, but that is what that would give you. So my daughter one time when we went to visit them, this was really fun. Why don't you tell them about that?
Okay, so they wanted to have this stadium seating. They've got to the left there, they have a giant screen. It's a projected screen. And so they wanted to have this theater seating, and they had this up on cinder blocks, which made this grandpa really uncomfortable, because if, you know, a kid was under there and somebody ran into that couch, it tumbles off, and somebody's hurt really bad. So Mama came up with this really cool idea. So you should tell them the idea, but that was kind of the context, is they wanted the back couch higher than the front couch. And so Mama.
So we just put boxes of food storage under it, and then we attached this little skirt that's kind of made out of this like suede material. We stapled it underneath the couch, and now nobody can see it. You walk in the room and you think, "Ooh, what cool theater seating."
So it just takes a little bit of creativity, which is often the case in the things that we do for preparedness. We have to get a little bit creative, because sometimes we don't have room, or sometimes we don't have money, or sometimes, you know, we have all these excuses, but a little creativity can go a long ways to solving these problems and getting the job done.
So what does 360 pounds look like? Now, like I said, I really think we should have 460 at least, but on the left-hand side, you can see it's that many cases. Depending, okay, if it's all potato flakes, you have more cans, right? If it's wheat and rice, you have less cans. But and then the buckets over to the right, that's about what it looks like. That's the space that you need per person. Okay, so let's talk about what enemies to food storage are. What are the things that are really bad for our food storage?
Teenagers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Teenagers are really bad for our food storage.
Not that they shouldn't be fed, and we love to feed, and we love them when they bring their friends home, and we feed them too, because everybody needs love, and sometimes that's spelled FOOD, and so.
And sometimes it's spelled CHOC.
Yes.
Chocolate.
Yes, and Mama does a great job of showing that love. She loves to feed people. But let's talk a little bit about the enemies, the things that are going to be a problem. So we know kids are, but let's talk about some of these other things.
So your food is a very valuable resource, and we want to store it correctly. Oxygen is super bad for food storage. Beans don't react quite as much with oxygen, but a lot of other foods will, when oxidation takes place, it makes it so that it doesn't taste as good, doesn't retain the nutrients like we would want it to. And so we want to make sure that we put most of the food, okay, it needs to be low in moisture because of botulism. Like, I wouldn't fill this can with apples, fresh apples, put an oxygen absorber and seal it, right? We're not doing anything like that. We're talking about dry goods, like dry rice and dry beans.
10% moisture or less.
Right.
As a general rule.
As a general rule. So that will significantly extend the shelf life of your food.
And of course, a lot of foods will have insect problems if there's that oxygen to sustain them. And that's not a happy place to be when you've got all these critters in there, and it's just not a good place. So yeah, go ahead.
I love how you say that now, but if it ever happens, you're like, oh, protein.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah,
but
whatever.
We'll try and avoid that.
Okay, you want to make sure that you store your food away from anything that could contaminate. Chemical contamination is not a good thing. And buckets and things are permeable, so make sure that you don't store it next to the paint. And as John was saying, insects in your food, we don't want to do that. An oxygen absorber will totally take care of anything that you've got going on there when it comes to critters. Light will degrade both the package and the food inside the container. So we want to make sure that we store it in dark. Now, sunlight is worse than room light, but room light is still not good. So if you don't have a dark place to put your food storage, put it in like a cardboard box or a tote or anything that's going to manufacture a dark environment for that. Moisture, tell them about your little pallets you made for me.
Oh, yes. So these are very easy to make. I just go buy bundles of fur strips at the hardware store, and these are just little pallets made of fur strips. It keeps things off the floor. It allows for airflow, and just a better way to store it, in our opinion.
And so we want to put low moisture food in the buckets, right? We want the buckets up off the floor. And remember that moisture can destroy packaging. We went through this whole little nightmare thing where all of a sudden we saw our cans were rusting, and John had to take care of that.
And we live in a very dry environment. We live in an environment that's typically low in humidity, but in our storage room, there was a couple of places where we had a little bit of moisture infiltrating. And so now we have a dehumidifier down there, and now we've got it very much under control. About every couple of weeks, I'll turn it on for a day, but we do need to make sure we keep things dry.
Yeah. All right, rodents. Oh, my poor sister. Oh, I'm not supposed to say who it is. This person that I know went to move, and she had food storage in Mylar bags, in cardboard boxes, in closets. And she didn't even know she had rodents. And when she pulled these out, I mean, the Mylar, it just totally ripped through it. And so you've got to be super careful about rodents, making sure the food is packaged to prevent rodent infestation, and do whatever you need to do to make sure that they're not around. Temperature. So this slide is actually wrong. So it's an 18 Fahrenheit degree drop in temperature, doubles the shelf life. It's a 10 degrees Celsius.
Probably.
Isn't that what we learned? So. We learned that recently. But the lower the temperature, the longer your food storage is going to maintain its quality and then taste good, right? It'll maintain the nutrients longer. So if you store it in your hot garage, you can cut your shelf life in half. If it's a 30-year product, you might only get 15. However, if you are storing it in a 40-degree root cellar, you could double the shelf life of your food. So we want to store it as cool as we can. Freezing food does not hurt grains, but like your canned goods, like a can of corn, it will compromise the seal and it will ruin your food storage. So grains are okay to freeze, but canned goods are not.
Yeah.
All right. So this is actually my sister and I, the one I'm not supposed to talk about. We purchased for Y2K, we purchased the same beans at the same place. My beans were stored optimally, we'll say. Hers were stored in a plastic bucket in the garage and then in a driveway for a year. So in the background, that is her beans. These are the same beans as I had. These two, and the one in the large cup is the same plastic bucket that stayed in my basement, right? And then the other one is the number 10 can. The number 10 can actually did a slightly better job of preserving the beans, but you can see how damaging temperature and like these beans had temperature and light. They were kind of like sort of even slimy,
yeah,
like
kind of greasy.
It was weird. It was so weird. And this is them cooked. John said he would eat it when he tasted it. I'm like, not a chance. That was
they weren't very appetizing. But you know, if I had to, I would eat them. But definitely, you've lost nutrition and flavor. So storage does make a huge difference.
Does. This is a wheat test. So on the right-hand side or on the left-hand side, we have 20-year-old white wheat that was stored in a cool basement. And then the right-hand side, we have 10-year-old wheat that was my sister's that were stored next to her beans in the garage and then in the driveway. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the wheat actually fared better. You can tell that it still rose and it was okay. And there were red wheat compared to white wheat. So it's not a perfect test, but the wheat was still edible where the beans weren't.
Right.
But the loaf on the left was so much better than the loaf on the right. Okay, so this bucket, what you're looking at here were beans. Those are not beans. That's white rice from 1969. Everybody loves to bring me their really old food storage. And so time, the older your food storage, the less quality it's going to be. But you look at that, and from 1969, the rice didn't look so bad. Your ideal storage conditions are going to be cool, dry, dark, organized. Because if you can't find it, if you can't rotate it, and then protected, whether that's protected from rodents or protected from teenagers, whatever it needs to be. Okay, let's see how much. Okay, I've got 5 minutes, so we're going to go through this really fast. The one thing about storing food long term that I want to make really clear is botulism can be a problem, and you don't want to mess with it. So, in order to make sure that you're okay, botulism takes 3 things. So it's water acuity, how the moisture moves, right? The moisture content, and then the pH. All 3 of those factors play into whether or not it's an environment where botulism can thrive. But for long-term food storage, we want to make sure that it's 10% moisture or less when we're going to store those, right? So number 10 cans, awesome. I personally think that they are one of the very best ways to store, as long as you have some really good can openers, and not just one, but many, because we wear them out and they're really hard to open without a can opener. The plastic buckets are wonderful. In my experience, they do not store food as long. If you line them with Mylar, then you're about where you are with the number 10 can, and easier to open. But as I'm getting older, the buckets are heavier and heavier, where it didn't used to be hard for me to haul those buckets. And now I have to depend on him, because I can't really take those 6-gallon ones or 5-gallon ones up the stairs. So think about that too, about whether or not you can handle that. The foil pouches or the Mylar, it's a really good option, but make sure that you store those in a place that's rodent proof, because the rodents will just rip through them. Now, peat bottles are actually fantastic for food storage. The one thing I don't like is that sometimes it's harder to stack them and store them and make them all fit, but it's a free way to be able to use something that was being thrown away and be able to use it to store your food. I personally put oxygen absorbers in them. I also think if you're going to share with your neighbors, like the little Powerade bottles that are there in the background, that's a good amount of something to share with somebody who needs to be shared with. So think about that. We've got a whole video just on how to do that, and Mylar. And then the glass bottles, we've got an issue with light, and we've got an issue with breakage. Right. But those are little time capsules. I mean, they're almost as good as the number 10 cans, except for they let the light in storing food. So think about that before you throw some of your bottles away. Again, it's kind of harder to store them because they don't fit nicely in each other.
But again, it comes down to being a little bit creative sometimes. You know, if I need to get this job done, sometimes that creativity.
Yeah, especially for the cost.
Lets us get there.
Right. So where do you start? Okay, we've given you all this crazy information, and I'm sure that all of you guys that are listening already have fabulous food storage plans. I mean, maybe there was something here that can help you change things just a little bit, like making sure that you've got the protein in there. But you're going to develop a plan. You're going to prepare a place. You've got to have a place to put all this stuff, right? And it takes room. And sometimes that means you got to get creative. Start stocking up a little bit every week, just a little bit at a time. And you would be amazed how fast you can truly make that happen.
And that last bullet, don't ever give up. We just have to keep taking those steps. And sometimes we have to put it on pause for a minute, you know, depending on what's going on in life, but we never give up. We just keep moving forward, taking those small, steady steps. And as Mama mentioned, that's what gets us there, the small, steady steps.
I am a huge fan of having food storage. I love being able to know that if I have people coming over for dinner tomorrow, I don't have to run to the store, right? I've got the things that I need now. 3 months, that didn't last really well. That was, I mean, we could always eat something, but
right.
But that was a little bit more. So you want to sum this up?
So yeah, bottom line, be realistic and make sure that you're making those small, steady steps. We love success stories and failures. stories. We get a lot of failure stories.
Those are
You
my
know,
favorite.
we do a little bit of investigative work to say, okay, what went wrong, and then we fix it. That's sometimes how we learn, is we fail. So don't give up if you have a failure or two. And again, just keep making progress.
Okay. All right, so we will stop sharing. All right, we're back. Questions and answers, you guys.
Jay, do you have some questions that have come in?
How can I hear the?
A lot of suggestions. One was about, what about getting a copy of the slides and such. And I said the entire presentation will be available on the TACDA website as of Monday, I guess, whenever Roseanne gets it there, or very shortly. There was some questions about sprouting wheat and how that improves nutritional value. And maybe you could discuss that a little bit.
Can I say something about sprouting the wheat real quick?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. We did a whole study, and actually, Jay, you're the one that spurred us onto that, because one of the meetings that we went to with Civil Defense Volunteers, we had talked a little bit about that. But there are people who say that if you put an oxygen absorber in the can, right, and you cannot sprout that wheat. Well, we took a whole variety of wheat that was stored a bunch of different ways, with oxygen absorbers, without, and actually the wheat that had been stored with the oxygen absorbers sprouted better than the wheat that was stored without, which I thought was really interesting. We also had one of our viewers send us pictures, and I believe the wheat was like 45 years old, and it was just cans of wheat. He opened it up and threw it out in this place that he had in his backyard, and it grew. Like, he had a whole wheat crop from this 45-year-old wheat. And so, be careful what you listen to, because we want to be able to sprout the wheat, because it significantly, it changes it so that it has the fresh vitamins. It's like your garden vegetables, right? You can get the A, and I don't remember which vitamins are in sprouted wheat, but I'm sure there would be
I
C.
know
I can't remember.
vitamin C, I believe is, and sprouted beans the same, supposedly. That's how Captain Cook was able to do all the sailing in the South Pacific that he did, was sprouting wheat, and that kept his crew from getting scurvy.
Grammy Prepper, I see that you were talking about bay leaves discourage insects. So I would love to see any documentation on that. I have searched like crazy to be able to find real documentation that shows that works. We've had several incidences where people have put bay leaves in their food storage, and they open it up and it has all kinds of critters in it. And so I would love, because that's a question I keep searching, because people say it, but we can't find anywhere. And on the extension office, on their food storage pamphlet, it says that that's an old wives' tale. So I just really want to see some kind of documentation from somebody showing scientifically, right, if it works or if it doesn't work.
I inherited some food storage, some wheat from a woman that passed away, and it was very old wheat. She had bay leaves in some of it and no bay leaves in others, and the bay leaves did, at least in my opinion, seem to stop the wheat from being inundated with weevil.
Interesting.
Okay.
So the ones without, did the other ones without have weevils in them?
Yes. Yeah, well, and I guess we ought to point out that weevils aren't really bad. They mainly eat the wheat dust. And so, although it looks very unappetizing, you can, the full kernels of wheat are still basically untouched. And so if you can winnow the wheat a little bit, you can still use that wheat. But the bay leaves seem to do the job. And because the ones without were, they were just covered with weevil, or old dried out carcasses of weevil, whereas the other containers didn't have it, but they had the bay leaves.
That's good to know. Yeah, very good. What else? Jay, what are some of the other? I saw
I
one
think you
about-
covered where to get your A and C vitamins. What about getting B vitamins?
So B vitamin, and I'm not an expert on this other than the fact that I'm B deficient a lot and I've had to go get injections because it depends on which B vitamin, right? But some of those some of the Bs you can only get from animal products. That's one of the reasons why having a chicken is such a good thing, right? Because that's one of the ways that you can get some of those missing B vitamins from your yard, right? From what you can do on your own.
It's yourself. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not an expert with all the different B vitamins.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can look into that. And I was talking to my personal physician just this last week, and he mentioned that I'll have to get the reference, but he said there was a nutritionist that said it's not what you eat, but it's what you can absorb that is the important thing. And he was saying, spinach has lots of iron in it, but he was saying that only about 1.5% of the iron in spinach is absorbed into the body. So, he said basically your best source of iron is red meat, but a lot of people, like the green leafy vegetables, which are great, but he said we have to do that. Now I will contact him and get that reference because he said there was he'd done some interesting reading on that, because actually I was diagnosed with mild anemia. I give blood on a regular basis, and he said, yeah, that would probably be enough to push into anemia if you're not eating an iron supplement.
Right. My physician recently recommended an iron fish. I had actually never heard of that before, but I thought, what a great thing for preppers, because it's actually a little fish, right? Because if you cook in cast iron, a lot of times you'll get that, but you put it in like your soups for 10 minutes, or you boil it in water for 10 minutes, and then it'll supplement your iron at appropriate levels. And I'm like, and at first I didn't believe it. I'm like,
Yeah, I was a little skeptical, but the doctor insisted that has been proven to really work and to help with that nutritional
You
for
put the
some
iron
that are.
fish in your soup for a while. Okay.
yeah, and you
And it
dose
doesn't
it
have to be a
according,
fish, but it's
well, there's a
just-
fish or a leaf,
Yeah.
but it doses it according to how long it's in there. So you do have to be careful. But fermentation is also a process that helps food become, or nutrients become, more bioavailable, right, to your body. And so there's all kinds of different tricks and tips nutritionally that you can use to help your body absorb things better. But he's absolutely correct. You have to not only have it, but your body has to be able to absorb it.
The back in the Middle Ages, they said they cured anemia by having women drink the water where they had placed a sword from a knight, and so they would put the sword in water, and they would drink the water, and it would cure the anemia.
So it was a sword made of iron. That would make sense.
Yes, yeah, it was made of iron.
There you go.
It does make sense. So you can make your own iron supplement just by drinking a little bit of rusty water.
I'd be careful on that one.
I saw one comment about using socks on jars. We live in earthquake country, so I do that. It takes away a little bit of the aesthetics, and Mama sometimes gets a little bit.
My jars are like trophies on my shelf.
Yeah, and it's beautiful food. But I do try and put on, like every other jar, so that there's a little bit of cushioning. So it's just my old socks, which sounds awfully gross, but
They're
washed, and I just
They're
cut off the tops and we slip them on there. So I'm way into repurposing things. I love to repurpose things, so that's just part of the normal process of my socks. I wear them and then they get cut off and put on jars.
Okay, let's go to James, where James, he said, freeze drying appears to be an important component to the plan. Equipment is expensive, $3,000. Is there a better alternative? So this is part of what I think we need to talk about with freeze drying. We were just fine without a freeze dryer until we got one like 3 years ago and discovered how wonderful it is. But, for many years, for thousands and thousands of years, people have survived without a freeze dryer. You can survive without a freeze dryer. But if you can get a friend who has a freeze dryer or somebody go in on them together or something, like one of the things that we do is we have several friends who we will freeze dry stuff for. That's just part of our relationship, right? We've got this thing going where they do things for us and we do things for them. We don't ever charge anybody to do it. But even if you can just freeze dry like enough meat or enough whatever to last you for a little while, you don't have to have a freeze dryer. You can get creative. I know that some of the local libraries now have freeze dryers that you bring your food and you can put in there. You have to sign up for a time. There's all kinds of different creative options. Canned meat is a really good thing, you know, and you can just go pick up canned meat at Walmart. Or I do love the cheese from the freeze dryer, but cheese is not essential to life. Chocolate is.
Yes.
Okay. I actually I've gone in on a freeze dryer with my neighbor. I didn't have a real good place to put it, and he says, "Well, I've got a shed, so we have a freeze dryer shed, and we've been able to stay out of our way, and the freeze dryer still has a lot of time that it's idle. So I need to work on that and do a little bit better, but it's my life is busy.
Life is busy. It's very, very busy. But if you have a YouTube channel and you're always making videos about doing this, then it happens, right?
Yeah, you get more motivated to get it done.
You get more motivated.
Very good. Any other questions? Please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions directly if you'd like.
What do you recommend for oil storage?
So it depends on which oils you like and which you tolerate best. There's the saturated and unsaturated. So my personal preference, I like olive oil and I like coconut oil. You can store like shortening that is super bad for you, but you can store it and it will last longer than the container. Like in our food store, you know how the container is sort of like
Kind of a paper tube that's.
Yeah. So we had some where the container completely degraded, but the shortening in it was still good. But I think extra virgin olive oil, for some reason, and I don't know yet why, but it stores better in the cans. We buy some really expensive cans of it. It stores really well in there for a much longer time than the bottles do. But the storage temperature, you want to prevent that rancidity. So the lower the temperature, the longer that oil will stay good.
And possibly the can just provides a light barrier that may make a difference. I don't know. I don't know the reasons, but
it could be the quality of oil originally in the can.
Yeah, and you do want a good quality oil to begin with. So
Yeah,
a lot of variables, but
I would, if you don't use either of those, I wouldn't store either of those, right? I would store whatever you use because you want to rotate through it.
Right. And other oils, you'll just need to rotate more quickly through some of them than others.
Yeah.
So
I use a lot of coconut oil and olive oil, but how long are you able to store your olive oil, the extra virgin olive oil?
So it all depends on the storage temperature. Ours is in our basement. It's a basement storeroom that is, well, what are our average temperatures? What would you say?
probably 55 to 60 is our average. A little higher than that in the summer and definitely cooler than that in the winter. But
I have never had any of it go rancid. I mean, we had the
Right.
corn oil go rancid.
right.
We've had corn oil and vegetable oil go rancid, but we've never had the olive oil. But I don't think any of it's been more than 10 years.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
But that's a good amount of time. I mean,
Yeah, I'd say
that's a long time.
5 to 10 years is our experience.
I haven't yet found anybody that's had coconut oil go rancid. Has anybody had coconut oil go rancid?
Nope.
Yeah. I think it's pretty much a forever thing.
There was some question about when to use oxygen absorber packets. What kind of food? What
So-
situation do you do that?
We We do not ever use it with salt or with
That's
sugar,
good.
because if you use it with salt or sugar, it makes it go rock hard, right? And both of those are stable, and an oxygen absorber isn't even going to benefit them. But the goal is 10% moisture or less. Now, we had a popcorn is one of the things that's about 13% moisture. And so we met with Joseph Bell, who is a food scientist, and he went through the science of all of it, because that's where the water acuity, the pH, and the moisture come into play. And so popcorn is not at risk for botulism. So there are cases where you could store dry goods that are over 10% moisture with an oxygen absorber safely. But, it's kind of back to the bay leaf thing. We do bay leaves for the insects, but if you don't use an oxygen absorber, then your food is going to oxidize, right? And that's going to significantly reduce the shelf life, even if you don't have bugs in it. So, but things like dry beans, dry pasta, fruits and vegetables that are dry, like they need to be all the way dry.
So that they snap.
So that they snap, but then that's kind of not true, because, okay, like raisins, I wouldn't put an oxygen absorber in them, but fruit leather is dry enough that, and I can put an oxygen absorber in it, but it also, the pH and the water acuity of it is okay.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, the recommendation is that it can snap. So I would use it in all my freeze-dried foods, definitely.
You have a lot of this information in your book?
A lot of it's in the book, a lot of it's on the website or the videos, because the book, it's about 10 years old now, so we've learned even more since then, right? And yeah, my very favorite is to use those oxygen absorbers. I think they make a huge difference. And at first I was told you could not use it with nuts and seeds, but according to the studies, storing like walnuts in a reduced oxygen environment, whether it's vacuum sealed or with an oxygen absorber, significantly increases the shelf life by reducing the risk of rancidity. It slows down rancidity, because that's what makes the nuts spoil. So I think that's really interesting. But never ever believe what I say. Always do your own research, right? Look at the research studies.
I have brown rice that is like 40 years old. Every once in a while I open a package and eat it. But basically, the reason brown rice doesn't last as long, supposedly, is it because it has oils in it. But I've also noticed that when you first open it, the rice is perfectly edible, but it goes rancid very quickly. Within a week or two, it goes rancid. So basically, I think it is that oxygen that allows it to go rancid. In fact, I had a kind of an interesting experience even with kerosene. I had a clear bottle of kerosene. I opened one and I didn't open one. I used a little bit out of the one, so I had a little bit of oxygen in the bottle. And over the next year or two, the kerosene with the oxygen in it went dark color. Basically, that oxygen did react with it, but the one that was sealed from the factory had very little headspace in it. It remained clear. So I think removing oxygen for oils, and nuts and perhaps brown rice is really helpful there.
And it's so ironic that the gas that is completely essential for us can do so much damage to our food storage. So
yeah,
just an interesting.
It is. The other thing I think we should mention is there's a difference between oxygen absorbers and desiccant packets, right? And so desiccant is supposed to remove the moisture, and so sometimes people will put both of them in their food storage just because they think it's a really good thing, right? They're just to make sure. And what we've learned about that is that the desiccant packet can actually prevent the oxygen absorber from working, because the oxygen absorber works because there is iron in the packet, and that it works because it rusts. Yeah.
It needs a little moisture.
So it needs that little bit of moisture. So if you, by trying so hard to get it all really perfect, you might be damaging it, right? So We don't recommend that you use them together. If you really, really, really want to use them together, don't put them near each other in the package. But yeah, they're really good if you're storing firearms in Mylar, right? You can put your desiccant in there.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any fun question?
Somebody from Hawaii mentioned that they've had coconut oil go, but Hawaii might be a different
Ooh,
situation.
yeah, because they're hot and humid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was the coconut oil? Oh, who said that? Brent. So when it goes rancid, is it already opened, right? Or does it stay good if it's still closed? You still
Or
got
how
that
dry
heat
is
thing.
it? Is it?
Huh. Oh no, Nick, you actually did what I was saying. Yeah, Nick, don't do that. And you know, the food scientist, he explained it to me, and I'll never be able to explain it to you right, but in order to reduce the amount of moisture in the food using a desiccant, you would have to use massive amounts of desiccant. Like one small desiccant packet isn't going to take wheat from 10% to 8% or whatever. And I can't explain that to you because I understood it when he said it, but
Okay.
yeah, I wouldn't do that.
And the storage life of lard.
I don't use lard, so I couldn't tell you. I've heard that it stores for a long time, but it's not a fat that I use. I'm sorry.
And I'm not sure what ghee is. It's somebody made ghee out of
So ghee is when they take butter and you cook all the it separates into just the oil. Ghee stores a lot longer than butter,
mhm.
but I also don't store that. I store butter in the freezer, and I like to use butter just as it is.
Yeah.
I have canned butter, and when in our 3-month thing we ran out of butter, and so I tried the canned butter. I was so disappointed. I was so
It is not
disappointed.
the same.
It's not the same.
And it may have been partly it was a little bit older, but it was supposed to have a long shelf life, but the flavor was not the same.
But you know what was interesting? Because all this time I like to put butter on the bread and put it in the oven and make toast that way. And I learned that if I take olive oil and put a little bit of garlic in it and just brush it on the bread like that, it actually tastes almost as good as the butter. Like I would have never discovered that had I not run out of butter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for being here and being part of the solution and making a difference and taking care of yourselves and your families and your loved ones. Anything else,
we really
Mama?
appreciate your time and such. If you want to plug your website, maybe everybody's aware of it or something like that, or your book or your website, or maybe that's a crass way to put it, but tell us where the sources are.
So you can on YouTube, we are the Provident Prepper. And we have all kinds of videos. Recently, we have a lot from food scientist Joseph Bell about food storage and
Rancidity and
yeah,
variety of topics.
So there's that, and then there's our website, theprovidentprepper.org. And right now, if anybody wants our book, you can actually get it for free. So we started this on Friday, and it runs through I think Tuesday. So if you go to Amazon and you search up the Provident Prepper, it'll bring up our book. And then when you go, it's a Kindle copy, but you don't buy the Kindle Unlimited. But if you look underneath it, it'll say 0.00 to buy. And so you can just click on that and you can get a free Kindle copy of our book. So spread the word. Anybody can get it. It's just our way of saying thank you to all of we would do it more often, but Amazon only lets us do it every once in a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the Kindle copy is totally free right now. So you can get all that information with that. And it's like 360 pages or something. It's a big book.
Great. All right, thank you. We'll call that good, and we will yeah, we encourage people to send us some questions if you have, just to the info at TACDA.org or whatever. We try to get back to people, or of course, read the Journal of Civil Defense. We try to get some good information in there and keep up on all the good websites. So anyway, good night, Jonathan, Kylene, really appreciate it. Good night to everyone else, and we'll go ahead and shut down the meeting at this point.
Right.
Thank
Thanks,
you
guys.
very
much.
Have a great night.
Have a good night, and we'll hope to see you next month. Thank you.